as humans around the world, we share a list of 56 things that are important to us. Now, in some parts of the world, in some target audiences, different values are more important at the top or the bottom. There's some that show up over and over and over again. I'll give you an example of one in a second. But the big message to take away here is we're all human.
Mr. David Allison, welcome back to our show.
Hi, David.
Thanks for having me. Hey, hi. Thanks for having me over. Nice place you have here. I like it.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Where are you located right now?
I am in my condo in the loveliest city on earth, Vancouver, Canada.
I know you've been
Beautiful.
traveling quite a bit. And last time when you were on our podcast, which was July 5th last year, just a little bit over a year ago, you were kind of on, I know it was COVID, but you just said you set a conference in San Diego or I know that you've probably been super busy since then and there's lots to cover. But David, I wanted to touch base just to do a quick introduction about what you do and why it's so important right now.
Getting to self-introduce is always just such a fun thing because you don't want to sound like you're bragging, but on the other hand, you want people to know that you actually know what you're talking about. So you kind of have to slip down the middle there and try and do both. So I get referred to as a human values expert. I'm a best-selling author. I do speak internationally all over the world. And I'm the founder of something called the Valuegraphics Project. And what we've done is build the world's very first accurate map of what everybody on the planet cares about, what our core values are. It's the first time we've ever known. Can I swear on your
Yeah,
show?
go ahead.
Okay, it's the first time we've known what everybody on earth gives a fuck about. And that's a pretty cool thing. Even if the story ended there, we now know what everybody on earth gives a fuck about. And I
I
love
don't know
that.
if you remember, but I actually called you a social scientist last time. I'm a big fan of yours. I've read all your books, your 2009 book, Sell the Truth. 8 years later, Branding Buildings Better. And 2018, we're all the same age now. We're going to get to what's coming up this fall. But before we get to that, let's talk about, just to recap quickly from our first session, tell us what value graphics is actually about and the study of values, like ultimately, why it's so important for these companies to really obtain your service.
So, I know that most of your listeners are in the real estate world in some way or another. So we'll talk about it in real estate terms, although this applies across the board. So I used to have a real estate marketing creative services company. And every time we'd start working on a new tower in Vancouver or, a resort project somewhere or something in Gotham City, some fictitious town somewhere in the world, we'd always start with a demographic target audience description. Who's coming to buy these things? Who are we going to have to go out and find in order to sell the units in this development or in this project? And so we'd sit down and write a little story about, I like to call them Bob and Sally. So Bob and Sally, they're aging baby boomers. They live in the suburbs and they got 2.3 kids and they drive a minivan. And we all know the story, right? That's who we're going to try and sell to. And then we made these assumptions about what these people were all about and therefore how the architects should build a building and how the interior designers should think about these folks and how the marketing team should buy ad space and think about what digital channel and all that stuff. It was all based on demographics. And every single time we did this, pretty much the same thing happened. We all know what the game is. Like 3 years later, the building is done and you're standing in the lobby and you're having your grand opening ceremony and everybody's there that you managed to sell a condo to. You cut the red ribbon, shrimp on a stick, cheap champagne, and you're looking around and I'd be like, who the hell are all these people? Maybe 10 or 15% of them kind of resemble that target, the Bob and Sally. These are not all Bobs and Sallys. So who the hell are they? What are they doing here? I didn't talk to them. We didn't buy ads focused on them. We didn't put anything in their digital channels. We didn't create a campaign for them. And yet here they are. Why? So that's what we set out to figure out. How do we solve this? Because it's like 10 or 15% of the people in the room represented the target audience that we'd been chasing. And we'd spent sometimes $1 million chasing that group of people. What about all those other folks? This is totally inefficient. If we're spending $1 million to get about 10 or 15% of the people into the room, we should figure out how to spend that money against the bigger percentage here, or something's up. But Vancouver, real estate development, it worked. We sold out. So we just did it again and again and again and again and again. So at some point I said, let's solve this. So we start digging into, why do people make decisions? Because that's what we're talking about here. These people decided to buy here. Why? Why did they do that? So you start looking at behavioral science. You start digging into behavioral science, and we can talk for days about neurology, psychology, psychiatry, sociology, all these different fields of behavioral science, but they all fight like cats and dogs about most things except one point that they all agree on across the board is that our values drive everything we do. All our decisions, all the behaviors we take, all the emotions, everything about us, who we are and who we will become, starts with our values. So it's like, aha, that's the answer. We need to figure out what people's values are and talk to them about those things, because that's how they're going to decide. So we started digging in and saying, okay, cool, that's it. We just need to know what their values are. And then the brick wall came along where there was no way to understand what people's values are. We can do it one at a time. We can give you an MMPI inventory, a Myers-Briggs test. There's all kinds of psychological testing tools, but there's nothing that we can use to understand an entire target audience of people in advance of them doing something and get their shared values. So after an election, we can go and talk to people who voted for someone and figure out what values made them do that. Before an election, you don't know who's going to vote for who. So how are you going to figure out the values of the people that you're trying to influence and that you're trying to engage? So we had to solve this, and that's what we've done. So now 750,000, we're working on 1 million surveys around the world, the team of translators in 152 languages, and we've finally done it. We now have a map of what everyone's values are everywhere on Earth, and it's more accurate than you need for a PhD from Harvard. So we know the data now can help us understand what to say instead of those demographics that we were using before, where we were saying, well, gee, Bob and Sally are aging baby boomers, so they're going to like, I don't know, Paul Simon, and yeah, they don't like technology, and they're like, comfortable. It's such a crazy idea when you think about it, that somehow your age and your income is going to predict who you are, when all it does is tell us what you are on the outside, not on the inside.
David, the last time that we had you on the podcast, I think I might have asked you the question, which was, in your research, and I think you were working at it at the time, you had said maybe we'll have a follow-up on it. With all of those millions of surveys in all of these different countries, is there a common denominator or theme for what the fuck people want? Have you, if you were to group it in, I know it's more intricate than that, because as you say, there's a lot of variables, but if you were to summarize it, do you have a summary for what in general people as humans want?
Yeah, you know what? It's beautiful to think about this. There's only 56 things that are important enough to enough people in the world to be considered core human values. There's only 56 things. There's 88 keys on a piano. It's more difficult to learn how to play Happy Birthday on the piano than it is to understand why everyone in the world does what they do. So it's kind of a unifying, beautiful thought. We, in these divisive times we're living in right now, there's more things that we have in common than many people would like us to believe. As humans around the world, we share a list of 56 things that are important to us. Now, in some parts of the world, in some target audiences, different values are more important at the top or the bottom. There's some that show up over and over and over again. I'll give you an example of one in a second. But the big message to take away here is we're all human and we're all part of the same family of humans. And the things that make us the same are far more dominant than the things that make us different. And it's a lovely thing to have data to back that up instead of just a philosophy that we would like to believe. It's actually true. Now, here's one thing that I can tell you that unites us around the globe, no matter what we're talking about. And we can be talking about countries, regions, we can be talking about B2B, B2C, we can be talking about technology workers or Wall Street investors or people who are going to buy a condo tomorrow. One thing that unites all of us is some form of what we've grouped together, these 5 values. We call them the Togetherness Values. More than anything, we want to be with other people. That's why we had such a hard time with the pandemic, right? We didn't get to be with other people. Now, how we want to be with other people, kind of different for different people. There's 5 different ways. There's family, there's friendship, there's relationships, there's community, and then there's the big mother of them all, which is belonging. We all want to belong. If I had to pick one single value that works in most places in the world, we want to feel like we fit in and belong more than anything else. But take all 5 and we can say categorically, those 5 values are more important than anything else on earth, everywhere on earth, to everybody.
I don't know why this is coming up right away when you say the togetherness, but what about those like introverted loners that don't like to be around people or don't have family? Are they just like an anomaly, or like they're a very small percentage of that?
I think there's a lot of people out there who get their sense of togetherness in ways that may not be apparent to those of us who are extroverts. So their sense of belonging might come from being part of an online gaming community, or their sense of being part of a larger group might be through their faith, or because they're fans of a particular TV show and that they get on into a chat room afterwards and that they talk to each other that way. There's very few humans who can exist without some sense of connectedness and togetherness with other humans. In fact, I was just reading a study in the, I can't remember where I saw this, but I was reading this over the weekend about what happens when you get put in isolation, in solitary confinement in the prison system. What happens to you? And within a course of a very few days, even if you're in there just for 2 weeks because you've, I don't know, had an extra chocolate bar or lunch or whatever it is that they throw you into solitary confinement for, you start to go insane. Your mind starts to fall apart. You don't have anyone or any sense of connectedness at all to anything, including time, because they control the light in those spaces. You're desperately trying to find someone to connect to, even if it's just a glance through a peephole while they open it for 1 second to make sure you haven't, passed away in the middle of the night. Togetherness, even the folks who say I'm a loner, they're getting it. They're getting it somehow.
Yeah, they're probably connecting with maybe like a spiritual thing or a higher power that's not really tangible. I can see that happening.
There's all kinds of ways that it happens, right? Maybe they just go to a yoga class once a week, and that yoga class is their sense of belonging. I tell you my story during the pandemic. I didn't think this is what I would end up saying, but people would say, "What did you miss the most about the whole lockdown thing?" And I missed going to the gym, and not because of health and fitness, but but mostly because of friendship. I go to the same gym at the same time on the same days, and you get to know the guys, right? And guys at the gym, the way they say "I love you" is you insult each other.
There's a brotherly banter.
That's all right.
Yeah, you can lift more. What are you, some baby weights you're lifting? Oh, like there's just all this kind of like insulting stuff that goes on. And what did I miss the most? I missed being teased by sweaty straight guys at the gym. That's what I missed about being unable to connect to and to get the togetherness that had become such an important part of my life. So We all get it in different ways. For me, I need sweaty guys at the gym to insult me, and then I feel like I'm part of something bigger.
It wouldn't sound too good if we said it this way, if we had the same answer.
Hey, to each their own. No judgment. No judgment. This may be a silly question, but just speaking to the 5 values that you had said: family, friendship, community, belonging, and relationship. Was that accurate? Okay. I'm noticing a common theme, and I'm wondering if it's a silly question, but sorry, you said belonging. Is acceptance among those things, or is it a separate entity or not involved at all?
Acceptance is not a value. Acceptance is perhaps a feeling you get if your togetherness values are being met in a certain way. So, in order to feel the belonging you need people to accept you. In order to have the friendships that are important to you, if that's one of your values, then it's acceptance by people that makes you feel that. So it's a symptom, I would say. That's probably not the exactly right. If there's a social scientist listening, they're going to be like, "No, you didn't label that correctly." But
Listen,
yeah,
I think the way that you framed it is important, because I'm just noticing themes in family, friendship, relationships, community, the belonging. And even if you had a family, you might not feel accepted, right? So it being,
for sure, lots of people aren't close to their family.
which is why they'd probably want one of the other values.
And in other parts of the world, family, it's an interesting one. There's parts of the world where it's way at the top of the list. And let me give you an example. Let's compare China and Africa. So 2 huge places, right? Entire country, China, entire continent of Africa. In Africa, community is way up at the top of the list. I think it's like number 2 or number 3 for the entire continent. And in China, it's not. It's further down. And what's at the very top of the list is family. So in talking to people in Africa, I've talked to some ethnographers and some other social scientists there while working on my next book. Say, what's this about? What's this community thing? And why is it so important there and nowhere else in the world is it showing up so high? And says, I know what's going on. There's a thing that is part of the culture and the DNA of folks when they grow up across the African continent, that family is part of the community. Friendships are part of the community. Your sense of relationships with other people, it's all about community. In fact, the Africans have a term, it's Ubuntu, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. And Ubuntu means I'm here. I have existence because you have existence. And you have existence because I have existence. And the phrase we've been overusing for the last couple of years during the pandemic is we're all in this together. The African version of that is Ubuntu, and this is inculcated in the way they grow up from a very, very young age. So there's no need to call out family as being any different than community. Whereas in China, family, top of the list. Top of the list. Super important before any other values come into play at all. Family is like the platinum princess uber dominant value in China in a way that we don't see in any other part of the world. So it's really interesting. I'll tell you one more story about this because you're interested. And even if you're not, I'm going to tell you the story anyway. Belonging and family are often number 1 and number 2 in various parts of the world. And something that Canadians who are listening to this will understand. In Canada, the number 1 most important value is family. And the second one is belonging. In the United States, belonging is number 1, family is number 2. So they're flopped. Now, think about that for a moment. We're watching what's going on in the United States right now, and I've talked to my American friends about this extensively. We've heard stories about how Aunt Sue and Uncle Frank are no longer invited to Christmas dinner because they chose the wrong side of the political divide. Their belongingness is not what we want. My belonging is more important. My tribe that I've decided to be part of, far more important than my family. Now, can you imagine that happening in Canada? Probably not. But in the United States, it's quite common these days for my tribe, that I belong to, my chosen sense of belonging outrules my family.
Are you geeking out? Like, 'cause,
Yeah,
you know,
I am.
you always
This
make
is
fun of me when I geek
fascinating.
out on these things.
Let's.
And then you know what? You go down from there to the level of a brand, and you say, why are people buying Patagonia instead of North Face? And we can see, wow, these guys are driven by these values, and these guys are driven by those. That's why they're doing that. So if you are the marketing guy for Patagonia and you know why people are drawn to your brand, you can double down on that stuff and not spend money on stuff that's not going to move the needle. And now we take it to real estate and say, I'm going to build a condo tower a block away from that other one that just got built. And I've got a group of people coming here and I know why they want to come here. Well, now I know what amenities to put in and I know what to call the building. And I know whether I should be investing in fancy schmancy finishes or whether I should be putting that money into really elaborate environmental features and materials in the building. Because we all guess at that stuff in the real estate business, right? We're like, oh, I think everybody's going to be into these things, so we're going to go and spend some money there and hopefully it works. But what if you didn't have to guess anymore? If you just knew this is the stuff that these people want, and this other building over here, those people, they want this stuff. So build it that way, market it that way, sell it that way, give people what they value.
Before we get into the real estate questions and how you have been working with developers, Brene Brown came up with this book, Atlas of the Heart, 87 Emotions. You've interviewed or questioned over 700,000 individuals across the nation. How did you come up with 56 words? Because obviously there's layers. Like you said, there's togetherness, which under that goes, there's community, friendship, belonging. And so how did you shortlist to 56 words?
Okay, so this is fascinating stuff. You're getting into the methodology of the research. And yeah, that's cool. I love this stuff too. And normally I can't talk about it because people are like, that's boring. Let's talk about something else. So I love analogies. So this one, I always use Halloween candy. So your kid comes home at Halloween and has a big giant pillowcase full of candy. Before you look at it, you have no idea what's going to happen. You dump it out on the dining room table and you start looking and you go, okay, I could sort this into groups based on chocolate versus non-chocolate, or candies that are individual serving sizes versus ones that are packs. I'm going to do it by color. There's blue ones, red ones, yellow ones, pink ones. There's flavor. There's all kinds of ways you can sort it. You don't know what the options are until you see it. And then you can go, I get it. And it kind of tells you how it wants to be sorted, right? You can kind of imagine yourself going, okay, the most sensible way to sort this out is like this. These are the piles we're going to make. Same thing with the data. You ask 750,000 people around the world the same set of questions, and you take all of their, because some of it was, multiple choice and quant questions. Some of them were long form qualitative questions where we asked them to just, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? So we then take all of those answers and we assign them codes so they become quant data as well. You take all these quant responses, 436 metrics, 180 countries, 152 languages, 750,000 stories, dump those candies on the table and start sorting it out. And what happened was 56 piles, 56 different groups that the data said, this is how we need to be broken up for this to make sense. There's not enough of this one other thing, like this one thing here that I thought was going to be a group. There's just not enough data around that. So we're going to, you know what? You could also put that one in this pile. So it's going to go in this pile now. So we ended up with 56.
David, you're bringing me back to my clinical psychology days when we used to research. It's great. It's happy memories. I think on so many levels, what you're talking about, just number one, from a very human perspective, it's amazing to see that there are things that link us no matter where we are, how you grew up. I love that. That's an amazing thing in itself. And in bringing it back to entrepreneurship, and even if we're talking about real estate sales, because as you say, most of our listeners are in real estate in some way, shape, or form. It sounds like what you're saying as well is if you truly know people's why and motivation, you can tailor an experience to them in the way that would make sense to them and target the right audience, therefore increasing your ROI, revenue, and just overall value that you're offering to certain communities. So there's lots of different layers there.
Oh, there's a ton of different layers, and I don't even know where to start on peeling this onion, but let's try this. I won't be any surprise to anybody who knows me that my background's in the real estate business. That's where I came from, and it was that story I told you a moment ago about Bob and Sally not being at the opening party that kind of led me to start figuring out what is this all about and got us to where we are today. But we started this with a study on real estate buyers because my previous book was called The Stackable Boomer, and it was about empty nesters in the suburbs selling their home and moving into stacked urban environments because they wanted to have some extra money to buy a place in Arizona for the winter. And we all know the story. And so I thought, okay, that's cool. That's what I was writing that book about. Sold my company, decided to write another book and did another study. And what my theory was that we spend a whole lot of time and money thinking about how to build diverse communities. Because we all know that a diverse community is a happy, healthy community. You talk to urban planners, they will tell you that this has been studied to death. And it appeared to me that this was a really kooky response that real estate development has, which is let's build monoculture buildings inside these diverse communities. Why can't these buildings be diverse too? Why does diversity stop at the front door and not just go in and all the way up to the top level? We have buildings just for wealthy boomers and buildings just for first-time apartment owners. And why? So I was trying to figure out what it would take to build a building that everybody wanted to live in, regardless of who they were. And here's what happened. The data started coming in fast and furious with one really fascinating point that I hadn't expected. And it was this. People would pay as much as 15% more for their rent or their condo if they could just know one thing. And it wasn't fancy kitchen, it wasn't amenities, it wasn't location, it wasn't any of those things. They would pay 15% more across the board, averaged out for various age groups and income levels and all that stuff, but 15%, if they just knew that the people they were going to be sharing the building with saw life the same way they did. They just wanted to be with people where they filled like they belong, where they had people around them who shared their values. So that was like the bing, 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 bing. You mean demographics aren't important and values are? Why wouldn't this also apply to banking and airlines and all these other things? So that's where we started doing the research. But to come back to the real estate sector, I thought the book was going to be called The Boomerennials because I was trying to prove that we could build buildings for everybody. I still have boomerennials.com. If somebody wants to have that, I can give you that. Yeah. So boomerennials.com as a concept became Valuegraphics. But 15%, people will pay a premium to live with people and be in a building that that aligns with their values. So yeah, applying this stuff in a real estate development has serious implications on ROI. And over and over again, when we do this with real estate developers across all different asset classes, they tell us that the metrics are supporting it. In some cases, it's we sold out way faster than we thought. We got better prices than we thought. David, you know what? Exactly the people you said were going to show up showed up. Thank God we went and bought those things and did that amenity set instead of the one we were thinking. It's constantly proving itself over and over and over that if you know what people care about and you just give them that, they're going to be happier. Now, long term, think about that. You're a real estate developer or you're an asset owner. You have rental buildings or office complexes, whatever it is you're doing. If you can make a place that aligns with people's values, your churn's going to go down. People are going to stay because that other place doesn't match my values. So not only do you make more money in your initial, exit, whatever that looks like, depending on what we're talking about, but the long-term viability of the space, a values-driven place to live or work or play, is going to be making happy people. And happy people, that's good for business. So why wouldn't you want all that to happen just by changing the way you look at people? That's all you got to do.
David, I don't know if you can answer this question. And although it may cost less to bring in a lead, because now you're targeting it based on values, and you're bringing in, instead of 15%, you're bringing in 80%. Does it actually cost more money for the builder to build based on values?
No, I'd say the inverse. Uh, it costs less because you're not wasting money on stuff that's not going to make any difference, right? If you find out that health and well-being is not an important value to a group of people who are thinking about your particular building, well, what are you wasting money on yoga rooms and fitness centers for? Instead, the most important thing in their life is personal growth and ambition. Well, then you need office. You need shared office lounge. You need what am I going for here? Shared workspaces, like we co-working. There's the word. Yay! Ding ding ding. You get the gold star. So co-working spaces, or you need, one developer we were working with recently looked at that and went, okay, well, what's business about these days? It's about Zoom meetings. So they put in a Zoom room so that you can book it, and it's a studio with good sound, great camera. Bring in your laptop, and you're in a professional studio when you're doing your Zoom meetings. Uh, the the ease with which you can determine how to invest in a building is exponentially higher if you know what the people you're building for care about. So you're not wasting money on stuff that's not going to help you.
So obviously what you're saying is the importance of demographics and psychographics are on a lower importance than value graphics, or there should still be a study on that before the building is conceptualized, right?
So we talk about it like a three-legged stool. So it's a three-legged stool of audience insight. You need all three. And here's how it goes. Demographics are still a really great way to describe what a group of people are all about. Let's face it. We're selling $2 million condos in downtown, Manhattan. That's not going to sell to somebody who's 18 to 24 years old and works at the grocery store. It's not going to happen. So you still need to have a demographic idea of these folks. But we also then think that because we have them demographically described, that we don't just know what they are, we know who they are. And that's the problem. We don't. We just know what they are. So let's let demographics do their job. Tell us what these people are all about, but not ask demographics to do stuff that they just can't do. Just because you're rich and married doesn't mean you're like every other rich married couple out there. Of course it doesn't. It's nonsensical, but we think it does because they're in a demographic group. So therefore we understand what those people are all about. So that's what demographics are for. Psychographics are a record of how people have behaved so far. How they felt, did they buy, is this their second home? How soon are they ready to buy? All that kind of stuff, which is all cool to know. And you can see patterns in that that may help you understand these people that you've demographically described. Now you have a psychographic record of their past. But the problem with all that psychographic data is it comes from exactly the same place, which is the past, because you can write it down. Therefore, it's already happened. And what we're trying to do is get people to do something tomorrow that they haven't done yet. Demographics and psychographics don't help you figure that out. They get you set up to make a guess about what somebody might do tomorrow. You add value graphics as the third leg of this stool, and now you know why they're going to make a decision. So you have a record of how they behaved, a description of what they are, and how to get them to do the things you'd like them to do. Now you're set. Now you're ready to go forward.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying. David, you recently made quite a profound discovery across real estate asset classes. And yeah, I think you spoke about it at the Canadian Real Estate Forum in Toronto. Is that accurate? Okay. Can you speak about your discovery on how people are not behaving the same way that they used to be?
Yeah. So I'm going to speak about this at the Canadian Real Estate Forum. It's in December in Toronto. And anybody who's listening who is going to be there, please jump up and say hi when I'm done. I think I'm the opening act on day 2. So if you're in the plenary session on day 2 at the beginning of the day, you won't be able to miss me whether you want to or not, because I'm going to command your attention for at least an hour at the beginning of the day. So what I'm going to be talking about is this discovery that You think about all the things that are going on in the world around us right now. People are quiet quitting. People are changing jobs to chase their passions. People are choosing products and services based on their values and what's important to them. We see evidence of all kinds of disruptions in the way things have always been going on all around us. And what's the one common thread that connects them all? It's all values driven. Values are remaking the world around us right now. People are behaving in ways that's very obvious for us to see is driven by what's in their heart. Now, this is new-ish. We've always been driven by our values. It's just part of what being human is. But what's new is we're all doing it at the same moment. We're all reevaluating what does it mean to be at work? I want to be at home. Why do you want to be at home? Because of a set of values. Why do you want to go back to the office? Because of a set of values. Why are you choosing to move outside the city instead of live downtown? Because of a set of values. Why are you choosing to cash in early and go pursue your dream? Because of a set of values. Everything going on in the world right now is happening because of values. So, as a real estate community, regardless of whether you're an asset owner or manager, whether you're a developer, whether you're in sales, whether you're in finance, whether you're an institutional investor, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're not paying attention to the values of the people around you that you're trying to engage, you're missing the biggest revolution in human behavior that we've ever seen. You owe it to yourself. If the world is changing because of values and what you're trying to do is get some little change to happen the way you'd like it to happen, you need to know what values are all about so you can participate in this global values conversation that's going on. So that's one part of it. The big profound discovery is the number I mentioned before. Across the board, people are willing to pay more for whatever we're talking about if they just know that it's aligned with their values. So I haven't met very many real estate developers in any sector or anybody in any business, frankly, who wouldn't like to charge a little more, who wouldn't like to be in the market, who isn't trying to just push the envelope just a little bit. Well, the secret to doing that is to understanding how to give people what they care about deeply inside their hearts, not superficially. People will say, oh, I want a really nice kitchen. Cool. Why? Why do you want a really nice kitchen? Oh, it's because creativity. You're a creative person. Now I know what kind of kitchen and how to talk about my kitchen in a way that's going to get you to go, that's the kitchen for me and therefore the place that I want to live. Other people, that same kitchen, the answer might be status. You're not going to use the kitchen. You just want to tell everybody what brand of kitchen you have. So that's all I got to do is focus on what's the brand on the kitchen. So kitchen could mean creativity. It could mean family. Kitchen could be in someone's mind, in someone's heart. Kitchen could be because this is where family is. This is where family gathers. I need a kitchen that works for family. Other people, I need a kitchen that I can brag about. So why do you want a kitchen? That's the question we need to get to if we want to be able to lead the market and continue to push the envelope even just a little bit. Just give people more of what they're already looking for.
How does that conversation look like when you're working with a developer who's building in Vancouver and Toronto, where our cities are so diverse? And as you said, Canadians have our set of values. Then there's groups that are immigrating into Canada, into our large cities. And then all of a sudden, it makes it unpredictable, or it skews the numbers, the values. And so what kind of dialogue do you have with the developer so that they are going to be able to optimize and maximize the revenue?
Well, I'd like to claim that I was smart enough to think about this in advance, but it wasn't me. I work with a team of statisticians and researchers out of a university in New Zealand, of all places. And they kind of plan for this in advance. So the way our methodology works is we have this massive database of what everybody cares about. But in order to know what parts of that we should be looking at, we go and talk to a group of people about a thing. So let's use a real estate development. Let's say I'm building a condominium in downtown Vancouver. Well, we go out and we find people who think that particular location and that particular condo, that's exactly what they want. That's the one for me. And we get enough of those people that they become what the statisticians refer to as a stat rep. So it's usually about 1,300, 1,500 people. Little factors that will change that number, but a significant number of people. We just ask them a few questions about, first off, is this the condo for you? And they, absolutely. Second, what do you care about? What are your values? A couple other questions. And that gives us enough information to use their responses to go into the benchmark study and go, oh, it's you guys. And you're here again, a little bit of this and that. And let's pull out some of the Halloween candy that's appropriate for that building. But it's based on the responses of the people in the market who said, yes, that's the building for me. So the market can change in a week. And we go and talk to those folks, and we're still going to have a stat rep that's going to tell us what to extrapolate out of the data set. Now, if there's a massive migration pattern in the course of 6 months, suddenly the entire city empties out and a whole bunch of new people show up, we'll have to do the study again. But because we're talking to a stat rep of a population where population change is a gradual, slow thing in the life of that building and the development and marketing of that building, the data we collect is going to stay accurate for the length of time that it would be useful for that particular organization.
David, you have a book coming out soon, a new book, The Death of Demographics, Valuegraphic Marketing for a Sales-Driven World. And I think this is the one where you've covered over 180 countries. Is that correct?
So the current book that's out in the market now. Oh, you were going to ask a question. You're just going to like throw that and let me talk about it. You finish. Sorry,
we want you to talk about it. Our question is, what will we learn from this book that has been different from your last book?
Oh yeah, cool. That's a good question. Good way to come at it. The last book was about Canada and the United States. That's all the data we had. You know, we're bootstrapping ourselves through this. So we got a book and we used it to start selling research reports and making some money so that we could go and finish polling everybody else on Earth, which, as you can imagine, was not an inexpensive or a quick undertaking. And so now that we have the complete global data set, two things have changed. First thing is we've learned more about what we're doing. You know, no one's ever done this before. So in the course of the last few years, we've been like, wow, oh, that's what, holy smokes. So our understanding of what this is about and how we can use it has grown. So the new book is kind of like the 2.0 version of that. Secondly, we now can map people anywhere on Earth. And we do that in the book. We go on a little bit of a journey around the world and say, here's what makes people in China different than people in Europe and different than people in the United States, and give you some data about that so you can kind of follow along and see this beautiful, beautiful rainbow of humanity and mapped out in our values around the planet. But I guess most importantly, what we've learned from this is another analogy. You know, if you're looking at apples, you can learn a lot about apples. But as soon as somebody shows you a banana, you know more about the apples because it's not that. It's not yellow. I didn't even think yellow was a thing until I saw a banana. So now that we've got Canada and the United States, but we can say, oh, and look at Europe. Wow, we just learned some new stuff about Canada and the United States. Look at China. Holy smokes. Look what we learned about Europe because we know China. So we got all the fruit and vegetables now. And because we got all the fruit and vegetables, we can see a lot more about all the individual component parts than we were able to before. The last thing that's changed is in the current book, there's a 10-question quiz that you can use to ask your audience, push it out through your survey system, SurveyMonkey, whatever it is you're using. And it tells you which of the 10 archetypes that we talk about in the book are most similar to your audience. So you can go to that chapter and go, oh, here's what my people are all about this. I mean, the creative, what do we call them? As a group of people, it's all about creativity. So there's a whole chapter on that. If that's that's the most similar to your target audience, well, you just got a bunch of great information about how to talk to them about their values. Problem with that is I say it's like playing the piano with your fists. You're using the right data, but it's sure not pretty, right? It's pretty. You're making music, kind of. If you hire us, we get to make a symphony together. It's really beautiful, but at least you're banging on the right instrument, right? Uh, Now, in the new book, there's 15 questions because, again, we learned so much more about humans by looking at humans from everywhere. So we got 15 questions, and there's 15 archetypes, still banging on the piano, but a little bit more accurately now. It's like there's an extra couple of keys on the keyboard that we're able to include. And you can use that quiz, and it'll show you which of those 15 archetypes is most similar. And the way we're able to give you data about those archetypes is far more nuanced than before. So I think it's way more useful. I think it's way more, and we call it the death of demographics because, we need to kill those things off. They're useful to a point, but beyond that point, the longer we keep using demographics and thinking it's okay to look at people with a set of demographic lenses on, not only does it not work, we already talked about that a lot in this conversation today, but it's causing a lot of harm. Because in our boardrooms around the world, if we sit down and say to each other that it's okay to think about people based on whether they're boomers or millennials or Gen Z, based on whether they're men or women or gay or straight or black or white or brown, all those demographic labels are validating and saying it's absolutely cool to look at people this way. And those things are the root cause of ageism, sexism, racism. Oh my God. And yet we all sit in our boardrooms and say, how are we going to look at our target audience? Let's use demographic labels. Okay, that sounds really smart. Let's do that. And so we're just embedding it and saying this is the way we should look at people, is based on ridiculous outward facing characteristics. So the death of demographics as a title is almost, it's clickbait, but it's also, it's a wish. I would like to see them relegated to the minor role that they need to have in our world and become not any longer the dominant way that we think about people as we go about our lives and go about our days. That's the real goal. Let's get rid of those things.
When is this book being released, and where can our listeners buy the book?
Book should be out, and now this is like, I'm making it. I don't know. This is probably bad luck in the book world, but it's supposed to be out at the end of November. Now, so many things can go wrong. There's so many people involved in publishing a book. As I'm my book number, whatever it is, but I'm always amazed by the number of hands that need to touch it. So as long as everybody does their job and everybody's on time and nobody misses a deadline and everybody's available and nobody has COVID and nobody's on mat leave and all that kind of shit, at the end of November, there should be a book. And I can promise you, you will all know where to find it. It's going to be on Amazon, of course. And I'm not the shy guy who's going to not tell anyone. So it'll be pretty easy it'll be pretty hard to miss when it's finally available. That's for sure. But in the meantime, for your listeners, I got a really cool thing for them. We did a study a while ago. You referenced it at the Canadian Apartment Investment Conference. And it was on people who rent apartments in Canada. And we turned it into a little report. It's a little 10-page, 15-page report, something like that. We basically put everything in there that we learned about the different kinds of people who rent apartments, so that anybody in the apartment game, whether you're retrofitting an older asset, or you're in marketing for a newer thing that's being built, or maybe you're in property management, or doesn't matter, whatever it is you're doing around apartments. If you go grab this report, it's free. You can have it. The reason we're doing it is we just want people to start to see what it means to think with a values-driven lens, and you can have it. Just download it and take it, and start to see what values can do, help you make decisions that are actually going to get people to do stuff instead of guessing at what might get people to do stuff. So the link is I sent it to you and I can't remember now. It's valuegraphics.online/renters. Is that right? Okay. So, well, I'm sure you'll be able to throw that up on the screen. Valuegraphics.online/renters. You go there, give us your email, and we'll send you a PDF. Promise we're not going to harass you. It's not. We're not trying to, scrape emails here because.
But having you said that, I want to brag that I have shared it. I've downloaded it and saved it on my laptop. I've shared it with at least 5 of my developer clients. And I know it's easy to share on social media, but I said, read this. You have to read this. It is so important because they're entering this the rental building market for tax benefits, and it's so useful. And I want to say I really appreciate all the reports and the videos that you put out, because I know that you do large speaking engagements. You write these fantastic reports that are, that cost money, but the in-betweens, the videos and the white reports that you put out in the newsletters, I actually read every single word. So I appreciate that you put a lot of time into it.
We're missionaries, We just want everybody to start using values to look at each other, because the world would be such a much better place if we get rid of these demographic stereotypes and start using values to think about other people.
We want to keep you to ourselves the whole day, but we know that you have other places to go and other people to hang out with. But we always wrap up with 5 rapid fire questions. And okay. So, and actually the first 3, you're going to be very familiar with these type of questions.
Okay.
Why do you go to work every day?
Oh my gosh, that's one of my questions. That's a sneaky thing to throw back at me. Okay, why do I go to work every day? Because I am on a mission to change the world, and I need to make money. But more importantly, I need to know that I'm leaving this place a little better than I found it.
Great answer. Why would you give away half of your lottery win?
It's so funny. I've used these questions so many times and I've never thought about my own answers before. Why would I give away my own lottery winnings? Why would I give away half my lottery winnings? I think it goes back to the same answer. I just feel like if we're not here to help somebody else somehow, then what's the point? Why are we waking up every morning? If I could give away all of my lottery winnings and know that I'd impacted people in a meaningful way, I'd probably keep just 1/10. I need just enough, right? But you could convince me to give away a lot of my lottery winnings if I knew that it was really going to make a difference and not just evaporate in a pool of donations to something. I'm very driven by trying to make an impact on other people.
And you know the final question. You write a letter to yourself. What would you say to your 10-year-old self and why?
I think the thing I would say to my 10 years ago self is to believe in what you're doing, believe in yourself, and never stop it. Just believe. Everything else falls into place. Find a thing you can believe in and don't stop ever for anything. It's the most important piece of advice I've ever had. And that's exactly what I would say to myself from 10 years ago and from 20 years ago and 30 years ago and even 40 years ago. I would say, just believe. Get out there and believe. Be that person who lives a life based on belief. That's a super easy one. We know what everyone on earth cares about. That's enormous. To have mapped the population of the planet, and not just based on age or income or marital status or much of money. Lots of people have done that. We know what's in everyone's hearts all around the world. And I love knowing that we know this now and that we don't have to guess. I think about the good it can do before I'm done on this planet, the good it's going to do. And I can't think of anything I'm more proud of than that.
This kind of falls in the same, but an added layer. How has Valuegraphics changed or impacted your personal life on a day-to-day with how you interact with new people you meet?
Oh, well, I, it's a blessing and a curse. You start telling people what you do. And I was on a podcast with these two guys. I wish I could remember their name. If they're listening, they're going to be upset. I can't remember their name, but they were like getting into this. And like, okay, and one of them said, okay, do him. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, profile him right now. It's like, we're live. He says, yeah, just do it. And I was like, oh my God, here we go. This is like being at a cocktail party. So you got to ask a couple questions, and then I can kind of tell you what the person's all about. And so I find myself meeting new people, and the first thing I do is I listen to them for a little while, and I watch their body language and try and sneak in a couple questions, and I'll go, okay, I know who this person is. And you start evaluating the people in your life based on what their values are and what's driving them. And it's a blessing because I can see past a lot of the bullshit that people put up to pretend to be someone. And it's a curse because I can see past a lot of the bullshit people put up to pretend they're someone that they're not. And you don't always like what you find. And so, yeah, it comes with some responsibilities, but I'm glad. I'm glad for it. I'm glad I'm not still walking around thinking that people are a certain way just because they're black or white or Asian or male or female or young or old. I've had so many more rich, wonderful relationships as a result of putting all that aside and just going, are we connecting here? We are? Cool. Let's talk. Uh, and not being like, I can't possibly be your friend because this stuff. Uh, have we got time for one quick story?
I do have one question that will actually probably come out to a story, but please share yours first.
I just like it's in my last book, so if anybody's read it, they probably know this book, this story. But as a great illustration of that point, one of my very close friends died recently. It was tragic. Miss him very much. We were really close because we both were very much into the art world, and we liked to smoke cigars, and we weren't allowed to. The people around us were like, no smoking cigars. So we would get together and not tell anybody and smoke cigars. And we drink whiskey and tell stories about the towns. We both grew up and spent a lot of time in our childhood in the same town. We were both paper boys for the same newspaper in that town. We were both Boy Scouts in that town. And in the Boy Scout world, the most important thing you can do is you win what was called the Queen Scout Award. And we both won the Queen Scout Award. And we weren't supposed to be friends because his name was Gordon Smith, and he died at age 99. A couple of years ago. And people saw us together and they're like, what's going on with you two? Because of our age? Really? How does that have anything to do with the fact that we were as close as we were? It has nothing to do with it. But if I had continued to look at the world demographically, I would have never have invested the time that's necessary to become friends with someone. Because it was like, I'm not going to be friends with that guy. So much richer to live your life this way and think about your consumers and your customers this way and your prospects this way. Because this is what marketing is all about, right? It's talking to people deep inside their hearts like a trusted friend. And now we have data that can allow us to do that. It's pretty cool.
I love the
Beautiful story. And another beautiful story I want to bring up, David, is you purchasing a piece of artwork from a little boy on the street. And he was asking for, you gave him more than what he was asking for. How are you still in contact with him? And how have you aren't? Okay. I kind of feel like that would be like a perfect story too, where maybe he looks up to you and you guys are friends for life, you know?
Yeah. In retrospect, I mean, I'd already freaked him out a bit. I think so. Asking him for his phone number would have just like pushed him over the edge, I think. But so yeah, I was walking down the streets in New York. I was in Soho, and this kid was selling paintings. And kid, I mean, I'm going to guess 13 years old. And they were little tiny paintings like this. And I collect art, so I got lots of big paintings. Didn't need this one, so I just kept walking by, and there was like, you know what? You go talk to that guy. So I go back and I talk to him and say, hey, what are you doing? I'm selling art. I said, why are you doing this? And he had a really bad stutter. And it took a lot to get this sentence out, like a lot. And I was like this stranger who stopped to talk to him. And so he was more nervous about that than he would have been otherwise. And he said, after a long time putting me like, come on, I'm friendly. I collect art. Come on, get it out. He's like egging him on. He finally managed to say that everybody deserves to have art in their life. And so I make paintings and I sell them in it cheap. He said, so I make paintings and I sell them cheap. But wow, here's this kid who's figured out a thing that needs to happen. And his values are pushing him to make it happen and get out there and not just sit down and go, one day somebody should. He's like out there doing this thing. I can tell you all the values that I would predict would be in his profile if we were to give him the survey. So I said, listen, that's amazing. And you've got a sign there that says art for sale that he'd made with a paintbrush. I said, I want to buy your sign because I just think your story is amazing. He said, really? I said, yeah. How much do you want? So he named a price. And I gave him 3 times that amount of money, and his eyes lit up like Christmas trees. And I took and I still have it, and it's sitting in my living room over here to remind me that you're never too young, you're never too old. It doesn't matter what you're doing; just follow your values, and you're going to end up in a good spot. The other thing that's important to know about this story is that kid did not need to be doing this. I could tell, he's wearing Arc'teryx and he's got he was not doing it for the money. He whipped out his cell phone to call, I'm assuming his mom, and say, hey, some guy bought my sign. He was doing this because his heart told him that he had to. It's such a beautiful example of, connecting around some values, but more importantly about being values driven, which is how that kid's living his life already.
That's a beautiful story. I'm feeling inspired now, David.
Thanks for sharing that again.
Yeah, our last...
Well, you guys are doing it. Look at you. You're having your podcast. You're doing it. You're out there trying to tell stories and get people to see things in a different way. There's values that are getting you to do this. So you're already on the right road. You're living a values-driven life, both of you.
Our last question, and very important question, where can our listeners find you?
Well, valuegraphics.com is the website. Valuegraphics just sounds like it spells like it is. It's VALUE, graphics, all one word, like demographics.com. Social media, I live on LinkedIn. So pretty hard to miss. If you find me, if you just put in my name, David Allison or Valuegraphics on LinkedIn, I will be there. And just Google. We've been so chatty and noisy for the last little while that we're pretty hard to miss on Google. So yeah. And if anybody's listening and wants to connect, please do say hi. Tell me that you found me here, and let's have a chat. And it's always good to know new people who think that values are a cool thing. And go get the report. Anybody who's listening, go get that report because we just made it to help. So it's valuegraphics.online/renters. And cool. And the tricky bit is it's valuegraphics.online/renters, not .com. Valuegraphics.online/renters.
Okay. And your book's coming out close to November. And when is your conference in Toronto? Do you have a date for that?
Yeah, it's December 2nd. What a lousy podcast guest. I'm supposed to know that. It's the 1st or 2nd of December in Toronto. It's the Canadian Real Estate Forum. I'm the opening act on day 2, thanks to my friend George, who runs Informa, and it's George's last year running Informa and the real estate conferences across the country. I'm very, very honored that he asked me to come and be part of the Real Estate Forum for his final show. So it's been a very exciting time.
Well, thank you so much. We had an exciting time with you being on the show. We appreciate all your sharing your experience and your knowledge, and you being the consumer behavior expert in our industry. We really appreciate that.
Thanks for spending time with us.
Yes.
Thanks for having me over.
Thank you.